Our last speaker is a psychiatrist from New York City, or actually Italy originally. Dr. Ralph Aquila ran the Fountain House, which is a very famous facility for the mentally ill, as well as starting the Sidney R. Bayer Jr. Center, an integrated clinic for the treatment of the seriously mentally ill. He is chairperson of the Lilly Reintegration Scholarships and the Reintegration Awards with the National Council for Community Behavioral Health Care. Doctor?
Good afternoon. So I am fully cognizant that I am the last barrier between you being in this dark room and being outside on a beautiful day. Second point, before I get started, you're probably wondering, why as a psychiatrist, when we've had all these legal experts and research people, I'm predominantly a clinician, speaking here this afternoon. The answer is, Ellen asked me to. And in my book, when Ellen asks you to do something, you do it, George. All right, with that said, let me get started. So I wanted to have a conversation with you this afternoon about what is community? How does community play into all the issues that we discussed today? In particular, how does community act as a prevention for people in particular, and I'm going to focus almost exclusively on schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. How does community come into play with helping to avoid incarceration, or how does it avoid people getting hooked up with the penal system in general, okay? I'm just curious, how many people in this room, if you could raise your hand, have either worked with people with serious mental illness, know someone with serious mental illness, or have any other kind of contact? Okay, so just about everybody. All right. So I have a number of slides here, and I don't want to be pedantic. And if anybody wants the slides because they're interested in definitions, they may not have them, because I don't know how many of you are clinicians. You can write me, very simple email, reintegration@reintegration.com, and I'll be more than happy to send you these slides. I just want to quickly go over this because I think we forget oftentimes the devastation of some of these illnesses, in particular schizophrenia, which is the illness that I am closest to, the one I've done research with, and actually the vast majority of my patients are afflicted with. So as you see, some pretty impressive numbers. You look at the burden of schizophrenia, and you see, again, the notion that no matter how ill somebody is, and again, 25 years of experience has taught me that no matter how ill somebody is, people want the same things we all want. Nice place to live, something meaningful to do, and a network of friends and family. So the question is, how do we provide that, and how do we get to that point? And when I say we, first and foremost as a psychiatrist, but as clinicians in general, because I think many clinicians have been taught that schizophrenia is a progressive neurodegenerative disease. And I believe, left untreated, if people are continuing to use drugs and alcohol, I think there is some significant data nowadays to show that. I think every psychotic break contributes to worsening cognition. So our job as clinicians, as family members, as legal experts, is how do we get people to buy into the notion of treatment? Because, again, as clinicians, we are taught about relapse prevention. Relapse prevention doesn't mean a whole lot to some guy in a northern city like Chicago or New York in January. Relapse could actually mean 2 weeks in a hospital where you're going to be warmed, fed, and taken care of. So we need to shift our notion of just getting people better or thinking about symptom relief. Symptom relief is important because symptoms can be horrible. And you all know that. You've heard about it. Ellen has been very elegant and eloquent about what symptoms mean. but it is not enough to eliminate symptoms. A little more data here. You look at direct costs, and you think about indirect costs. And to me, that's actually as tragic, if not more, when I think about how many people out there with schizophrenia who weren't able to fulfill their dreams, who weren't able to complete school and get their degrees and be active in contributing to making their society better. These are some of the things that I think are just dramatic and that we need to deal with. Again, you look at a bunch of the numbers here, more issues, okay, around numbers and whatnot. And these go back some time, but they really haven't improved, unfortunately. And I think you're all pretty much aware that this year is the 50th anniversary of the Community Mental Health Act, signed by President Kennedy. You all know that? Well, we've made a little progress, but boy, we got a long way to go. I mean, most of the mental health centers in this country aren't providing the kind of resources that we're talking about. We're looking at assessments, diagnostics, getting people the appropriate meds and symptom relief, but we're not connecting the dots. So if you think there's a problem in the legal system and setting up the special courts for people with mental illness, look at our world, where you've got the medical model over here and the rehabilitation world over here, and never the twain shall meet. So from my vantage point, again, of having done this now for a while, I continue to try to figure out what is it that we can do to get people the right resources. And look here, between 200 and 600,000, we don't even have precise numbers, are on our streets or out somewhere in the countryside, in our rural areas. There are remedies for homelessness. People oftentimes are kind of flippant and talk about housing as just another piece of the puzzle. But housing is a fundamental first start when someone is homeless. Duh. I mean, you can't be looking at treating people who are homeless and seriously mentally ill without providing the kind of housing. And what we have seen in New York is that there is a greater encounter between these particular individuals with serious mental illness and the penal system and how they're getting victimized. So just a quick aside here. We've been talking about the criminalization of the mentally ill. Well, okay, so there are a number of people who get themselves into trouble, but you all know, and actually I didn't hear it, maybe I was missed or I went out for a moment, but the vast majority of people with mental illness are the victims. They're not the perpetrators of the crime. And yet that doesn't make the front page of the headlines. What makes the front page of the headlines is what, in particular, when someone with schizophrenia does something outrageous. We never see that headline, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, whatever. Joe has been working 30 years, has supported a family, and taken care of business. And he, by the way, he also has schizophrenia. That never makes our front page. Well, got to cite one of our speakers today. 3 to 20% of people in jail have mental illness. Community correctional institutions. Again, you all know this. I like to refer to the Dubious Award as the largest mental health, well, not mental health, mental institution in the United States. Keeps going back and forth from my hometown to your hometown. This is from a colleague. And in the Fountain House world, we refer to each other as colleagues, whether you're a staff or whether you're a member. And I'm going to get into that in just 2 minutes. And I'm going to be very mindful of my time here. So this is Davida. Davida, I think, has very elegant data here. Suicide by inmates with schizophrenia, manic depressive illness is relatively common. You know that. Data collected from New York State jails between 77 and 82 showed that half the inmates who committed suicide had been previously hospitalized for treatment. So obviously the treatment didn't go very well. For each successful suicide in jails, there are many others that are unsuccessful. And according to chief psychiatrist in LA County Jail, the ratio of failed suicide attempts to death by people with untreated brain disorders is about 20 to 1. And again, I think you know this, but I wanted to show Davida's slide, and I'll tell her that people were very responsive to it. This, I think, is a very important slide. Schizophrenia is treatable. Okay? And I think people forget that. And again, we have a number of points here by Hargraves and also for the biology of mental disorders, how people can certainly recover. Now, this is from Jeff Lieberman, who's actually soon to be the new president of the APA. And again, I just want to underscore this really briefly, that oftentimes we don't come up with a diagnosis until later on. So we know that there are some premorbid symptoms that are occurring. And we've got a prodromal phase where things are starting to really heat up. And then you have the first break. And that is just such an important and dramatic moment. And that can occur anywhere from early teens into later points in life. But we know that for many people, it occurs in their formative years. So we need to understand and make interventions. And one of the things that I would love to do, and we're not looking to label people. We're trying to get people the appropriate kind of supports and resources so that they can move forward with their lives and not end up in this terrible downward spiral that too often times we see. Bipolar, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. If you want these slides, I don't want to give this whole lecture on state of diseases, but I just want to run through it here, all right? You see the morbidity of untreated bipolar, what happens, work loss, worsening of medical conditions, greater rate of, again, encounters with the penal system, all right? Lifetime prevalence of bipolar you see there. And again, I'm just going to run through these slides, and for anybody who wants them, I'd be more than happy to send them to you. But just some points: higher divorce rate among folks with bipolar disorders, greater marital difficulties, job and school-related problems, etc. Kind of our vision of what we think treatment needs to be. And this is actually, you heard that I chair the Reintegration Awards. One of our our very first award back in 1997. This is to the Village over in Long Beach, California. Okay, I think, which is a great program. Their vision, and very much our vision of recovery, how we go from an all-encompassing disease to, and you could put bipolar in there or any other illness you want, but how we don't define the individual as a disease. We understand that with the appropriate resources, we can get up to the last slide here, where it's just a small part of their lives, and they are everything else that we all want to be. So that's kind of the premise. Something that I am very, very passionate about is that we need to understand moving beyond practice guidelines for the acute phase of these terrible diseases. We've got outstanding guidelines, Joint Commissions on Accreditation, and so many other agencies out there that manage and show us how to treat the acute phase of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Somebody comes into the emergency room, somebody ends up in the inpatient unit. We all got that down. Now they're going to discharge. They're actually getting better. What happens? What are the guidelines for the long term? Does anybody here have those guidelines? Because I would love to see them. They don't exist. Now, that doesn't mean people aren't doing great work, but there is not a connection between the medical model and the rehabilitation or recovery model. Everybody talks about recovery, okay? But where is it occurring? If you were to look at the total number of rehabilitation opportunities in the United States, they would number somewhere around 10 to 20,000. There are approximately 3 to 4 million people with serious mental illness. A little bit of a discrepancy there. So we need to figure out how do we do this. So let me focus on what Fountain House is and kind of, well, I still got a little bit of time, about 10 minutes. So what is Fountain House? Well, what is a clubhouse model of rehabilitation? And by the way, this is a model. I am not saying this is the only model. I'm not even saying this is the best model. I love it. I couldn't imagine treating people with serious and persistent mental illness without a clubhouse, in particular Fountain House behind me. But there are other modalities of rehabilitation. So what is it? It's been around for 60 years, so we have a little bit of a track record. It's defined as an intentional community. And the key factor there is that there's an establishment of relationships. So you can imagine, here are people that have been estranged from their families, have been put to the outskirts of our society. They somehow get to us because they're referred, they were in an inpatient hospital, whatever. They get to us, and now they walk through the doors and they're welcomed. Hi, it's nice to see you. Can you give me a hand? Because the notion is being made to feel needed and giving back. So it's not like a traditional mental health facility where you're getting treatment and you become a passive recipient. In our case, you switch roles to becoming an active participant. And the hope is that you are going to buy into this, you're going to show up on a regular basis, and what we hope to do is then to get you to some form of employment. So what you see is we are a cost-effective model. It's about $3,000 a year to have somebody attend Fountain House on a regular basis. When I say generalist model, a Fountain House worker may have an MSW, may have a PhD, but everybody does whatever it takes. In other words, everybody does Windows, okay? So we see that this is an important moment, and that moment, in fact, where the member is sitting down with usually a young, well-educated individual, usually pretty well-dressed, maybe the first time that that person has come into contact with somebody who's going to talk to them as a human being, as a colleague, without any ulterior motive, without any other goal except to work with you to be the best that you can be. Clubhouse, we're open. Fountain House in particular, we have about 350 members a day coming through. We have about 1,200 active members at any given time, and some members may come in only on evening and weekend programs because they're working all day. We're open 365 days a year, and that includes the major holidays. Thanksgiving Day is actually our most important holiday, where we serve multiple course dinner with linen and candles and music being played, okay? We have what's called the work order day, and what we've most recently incorporated is educational opportunities. So we've gone from having a major focus on employment to also adding opportunities for people to get their college degrees or getting their GED. And it may start with a GED, it may start with an associate's degree, and working your way up to getting the degree that you may not have been able to do earlier in your life. So we're there basically 24/7, 365 days a year. And for some people, they may only come in on Thanksgiving Day, even though they've become successful and are doing things, because that is their community. Fountain House is located in Midtown Manhattan. We're not isolated or removed. We're part of a pretty bustling neighborhood. It used to be called Hell's Kitchen. Now it's, in my book, Hell's Kitchenette, because it's so fancy-dancy. And you come there, and as I said, you are welcomed. And the main focus is, how far can we go together? How much can we accomplish? And I think that's a major paradigm shift from trying to identify your symptoms and just managing your symptoms to turning them into success and employment. So these are some of the key factors, and I can never give it justice. I mean, I would encourage you to go visit a clubhouse. There are a number of very good clubhouses around the country. I would strongly suggest you do that. But ultimately, what we are trying to create is this connection of community that allows people to have a purpose and a meaning. And yes, we have, over the years, intervened with the penal system. I have spoken to district attorneys numerous times where we will guarantee that we will provide oversight, where we will make sure that people are getting their meds, making sure that they are going to be attending a program on a regular basis, and we've had some pretty nice success with doing that. Just quickly, we really have a shift. I mean, a therapeutic alliance, an alliance between a clinician and quote-unquote patient-client is important. But in our world, it really needs to move on to a collaboration where the patient person is really the captain of their ship and their team leader, and where we're really focused on the goals. Remember those three things I said earlier: nice place to live, something meaningful to do, and a network of friends and family. So we really need to focus on the strengths. And no matter how ill somebody is, as I said earlier, there is some measures of strength there. We know what causes relapse. And here, somebody, I can't remember now who mentioned it earlier, we talked about a resistant patient. Well, I happen to think, look at that point there, complex. Only 50% of people make it to their first outpatient appointment. That's because the way it's set up, you don't have the opportunity to get there. So in my world, at least in my experience, it's more a treatment-resistant mental health system than a treatment-resistant patient that's not getting the appropriate care. And again, the notion that we are not engaging people, we're not providing something that people can really sink their teeth into and become a part of. It's just not enough to be talking about relapse prevention. And how oftentimes do family and caregivers get left out in the cold? People are living in very stressful environments. A lot of our folks are coming from some very difficult environments, whether it be living in terrible congregate housing or just coming from a very substandard kind of situation. Again, I don't want to be pedantic here. Just quickly, the when of rehabilitation, we could go back to the Giel community in Belgium. Maintenance was a big part of what we believe, and custodial care was a big part of care as far as psychiatry goes. Psychiatrists have not historically been involved in rehabilitation. I happen to think there is some other models out there, and the ACT model, which incorporated a voc rehab specialist, now termed IPS, or the Intensive Placement Services, and Bob Drake was behind that, was a big part. We talked about Clubhouse. There are a number of other models, as I mentioned earlier, the Village. And again, if you haven't seen the Village, it's not too far from here. I would recommend you take a ride down to Long Beach. And then, of course, the Living Skills modules by Dr. Lieberman, just up the road, right? UCLA. So, I mean, there are obviously a bunch of other models out there. The problem is there are not enough. There are too few and far between. Again, we talked about this, how we need to really focus on strengths. We need to understand that time might be really important. It's not going to happen overnight. We happen to think, again, employment and education is a key catalyst. And I know that word empowerment is overused, but I really do believe we need to listen, really listen, and believe in what people are saying. So again, we need to think outside the box. We may not be providing the clinical services in a nice medical office or in a traditional clinic. We might need to be stepping outside the box. We need to really involve families. Families are big advocates. We need to have workers or whomever is important in the individual's life to become part of this, and that again will keep people engaged, and we can listen for those subtle changes, because I, as a psychiatrist, may not see that individual that often, but I am certainly open to people calling me and saying, hey, John is not looking that good, he's having problems, or the Fountain House workers may call me and say, Mary is distracted, she's not able to complete her work in the unit. So we don't necessarily have to get to a full-blown relapse, and we can address some very subtle changes. And again, I mentioned patient/consumer as their own advocates, and again, that means really listening to what people have to say. Again, just want to be clear that keeping people in the treatment and keeping them on target, we really need to be listening about concerns, side effects. When I say don't use confidentiality, I'm not saying breaking their confidentiality rights. I'm just saying don't use it as an excuse. You can listen. People can call you and you can listen. I mean, the legal people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I can listen. I don't have to divulge information. But if you call me and say, my loved one is not doing well, I am going to wake up and really try to figure out what is being said, okay? And again, ongoing contact with involved families is essential. And when I have everybody on the same page, that's when I'm saying, whew, this is going to be an easy one because I've got a whole bunch of collaborators, and together we are going to move forward, right? So just a couple more points. We always want to make sure when medications are involved, how do we keep people in the loop? We don't disenfranchise anybody. We always want to be educating and certainly understand. There's some great data with multifamily groups in particular to help us with adherence to treatment. And just some real basic stuff here. You're looking at costs. And again, this goes back a ways, but still very apropos. And this is Dennis Colhane's data, also from Boston College at the time. And you look at some of the costs here. When you look at, for example, in the state of New York, what we've implemented since the early 90s, in New York supportive housing, you're looking at minimal costs compared to acute hospitalization or long-term state hospitalizations, all right? So again, there's a lot of common sense here that I believe we need to be implementing. And unfortunately, even in the 50th anniversary of the Community Mental Health Act, we've not done our job. and I think we really need to step up and do a better job. Here, Port study, again, goes way back to 1998. Lisa Dixon and Tony Lehman down at the University of Maryland at that time. We know how important it is to engage families and engage individuals. It's not happening. Almost 63% had not received any family contact for 6 months, according to the Port study. And again, 1998, 2013, unfortunately, those numbers have not changed. So we obviously need to listen. We need to step up. We need to be communicating. And I certainly appreciate, and I was listening attentively all day today, the challenges in the legal world, but the challenges in our world are no less, unfortunately, because things are just not moving along. Wanted to close with this photo. This is Thanksgiving Day, George. You were serving here, remember? It's George Handren, head of the Sidney R. Bear Foundation, a big supporter of both Fountain House and the Bear Center. And as you can see, beautiful setting, linen, cloths, candles, just a beautiful day. And somewhere I've been volunteering. I show up on Thanksgiving for the last 20 years. I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you, Ellen. You did a great job in doing this. Sure.
I have a question. I work in a clinic setting, outpatient community center, where I was once a client, and now I work side by side with psychiatrists, and I find it sometimes difficult to try and get the client's perspective when I'm working with psychiatrists, even though they're very dedicated doctors, but sometimes they're just steeped in that medical model, and it's real hard sometimes to speak up on behalf of the clients. Any suggestions?
Well, that's a great point, and I think, unfortunately, that is a prevailing attitude. I just can't understand symptom treatment only. I mean, it's no fun, right? I mean, diagnostics, assessments, writing meds is the easiest part of the job. For me, the greatest success is when somebody shows me their first paycheck or they show me their recently acquired degree. And I'm certainly not going to be able to do that alone. I need you, I need the families, I need whomever is important in that patient's family or in that patient's life to really move people along the continuum. So I think that's also part of our challenge. How do we educate psychiatrists to be looking beyond symptom management, beyond just diagnostic and assessments, and really looking at what the individual and what the families want and what the whole system in that patient's life is trying to get to?
Hi, I want to thank you. I'm formerly from New York, and my son just recently moved back there. I could not get him to stay in any programs out here because, again, they're all voluntary. However, within 3 months of his being in New York, he's been fully involved in a program out there. I don't know exactly what happened. Something obviously happened, either a suicide attempt again or something happened. Yeah. But he's in a program already from 9 to 3, a day program. And one of the things I noticed is out on Suffolk County, Long Island, and it is in a very remote area. And I even wondered, how the heck does he get there? Because he told me he goes from 9 to 3. And I looked on their website, and I noticed they have what they call drivers. Yep. They obviously must go out and pick him up and take him there every day and bring him home, which there's simple little things of why maybe somebody doesn't go to a program because they can't get there. So I want to thank you again. He's in a program. He's doing well. And they also got him a job. Thank you.
I think the real takeaway there is that you can't lose hope. And I think as a field, we need to do a better job of instilling hope and making sure it's there. And as my childhood hero used to say, he was a relief pitcher for the Mets, you got to believe.
Hi. So what I wanted to ask about is it's taken a number of personal shifts and changing roles and boundaries to work with a clubhouse for 20 years instead of the way you were trained. David was talking about the changes that the lawyers have to make to work in this sort of way, the roles and shifts and how it affects their legality and ethics. So if you look, we're trying to come together here with a medical legal thing. When you do things like promise to take care of somebody to the DA or to talk to things like this, what have you noticed as the important personal changes or role changes or boundary changes that it takes you to moving from the normal role of a doctor to be able to actually collaborate, be a teammate with the legal people?
So let's go back in time. And let's think about the old GP in our community. That general practitioner knew everything about you. You'd see him in town. You'd say hello. You'd run into each other. I mean, look.
He probably even played golf with the judge.
Right, probably, exactly. So my point is that we obviously need to maintain people's confidentiality, and I hope I'm not misunderstood that I'm suggesting that we break that, but I'm saying that when we develop a relationship, when we develop trust, I think that's where communication could truly begin, and we could truly have a real exchange. And I think that is important between the doctor and the so-called patient, between the clinicians and the legal system. I just think we need to be more open-minded and just understanding that our number one goal is how successful can we get that individual to be, and how do we work together to get there.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is, how many are there open 365 days per year programs in the New York City or New York State?
So you're asking how many programs are open 365 days a year? Not many. I mean, there's other clubhouses in New York, predominantly in New York City, but most programs are not. That doesn't mean there's not emergency services available 24/7, 365 days a year. But one of the keys that I have seen and learned over the last quarter century is that this community that you see here is what is so important, because oftentimes people will stop their meds. They may not need or be eligible for involuntary hospitalization, but they will continue to gravitate around us, and because of the relationships that have been established, will voluntarily, with their key person, with their worker, go and get assessment or come down to the Bear Center and get the help that they need. So the fact of being open all those days and these weekend and evening programs and these holidays that we don't celebrate Thanksgiving Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It's actually on Thanksgiving. It just goes so far in establishing trust and getting people to buy into what we're trying to do.
Well, I just wanted to comment briefly that I just really appreciate the emphasis on relationships and on community. I feel like that's come up so much as a theme today, whether it's Judge Manley writing the letters for the 30 days or the clubhouse model. And I just wanted to bring it up because it came up earlier this morning a little bit about the debate of assisted outpatient treatment. I guess the reason as a patient's rights advocate that I'm wary of that kind of model where treatment is forced is that I worry over the long term that doesn't facilitate the kind of relationships, right. And there's just that risk of the loss of right. liberty, and I just really appreciate a model like this one that really supports relationships over the long term and really focuses on getting rid of barriers that prevent people from people with mental health disabilities from getting everything that they need and a fulfilling life. So thank you.
So actually, thank you for that, because I had forgotten that point. I wanted to bring it up because I had heard you earlier make the comment. It's more work up front. There's no question, in providing this kind of a community is more work. I don't really think it's more expensive, because if you don't have it, people are bouncing in and out of ERs, ending up in the prison system, et cetera. I understand that there is a need for involuntary hospitalization at times. I understand there may be needs for assisted outpatient treatment or whatever you call it in California. In New York, we have Kendra's Law. I do see a possibility for that, but I continue to ask myself, and again, I'm really just directed at me, not at anybody. I'm not pointing fingers. Have I done my job to engage this individual? Have we, as a community, Fountain House, me, and whomever else is important, have we done our job to really engage you so we don't need to get to that point of having to be coercive and doing these kind of interventions? It's a question.
I completely agree. I really like the focus on making sure the doors really are truly open before we're trying to force anyone through them. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a New Yorker as well.
Won't hold that against you.
Yeah. Me neither. And I'm intimately aware that I'm now one of the last barriers keeping us all from out there. But I did want to comment on your intentional community point. And I want to share a little anecdote about a model of intentional community that I found. So maybe anyone here can take this idea and run with it, because I don't know how to do it. I got the opportunity to work in China last year. In order to get a work visa, you have to see around 14 to 17 specialists just to enter the country. I have a few degrees behind my name. I'm a hard worker. In 5 months in the US, I couldn't get it done. I go there in order to start my job teaching. I am escorted to a one-stop shop building. It's the most creative urban planning I've ever seen. And I'm not here to discuss democracy versus communism. That's not my point. My point was creativity that I saw. I entered this building. Within under 2 hours, I had seen everything from a dentist to a social worker to a fingerprinter to a real estate agent. It was a one-stop shop where I got everything done with highly qualified individuals who that was not their main work office. They all had separate individual offices, and 1 day a week, they rotated their staff to come work at one building so people could get work visas. It was really soothing for me entering a foreign country to have one appointment to get everything done. And the people, the clients that we work with, we have to remember that culture shock is a real thing, and when you are re-entering the system, whether it's an American system or a Chinese system, it is shocking and overwhelming. And the easier we can make our models for them, the better it is. I don't know how to do it here. Maybe one of you do, but I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just really appreciate the last comments, because some of the talk about it's hard for someone with a disability to navigate systems was hard for me to hear, because it's difficult for most of us to navigate systems, and it's excruciating in our culture to ask for help, you know, whether you have a cognitive disorder or some other disorder or not, you know, to talk about things that are personal or things you may have shame about, or to try to get somewhere when your car isn't running or whatever that is. But I don't know if this is true or not. It must be true, because I've heard it a number of times, and you said it again today, something about people with labels of psychosis or schizophrenia or things like that, having crises. I don't know if that's the word you use, but causing some kind of brain damage or something like that. And, you know, I've heard it a number of times, and I just wanted to be one more person that says that something like, you know, I was hospitalized over 30 times hadn't had those labels put on me, and I got a bachelor's degree in mathematics and graduated magna cum laude, and, you know, there are a lot of us out there that it must be, I just don't know how it's helpful when people say that, you know, that it causes brain damage or something like that, because it's so hard to hold on to hope. You know, whether it does or not, I just don't know how it's helpful to say that, because it doesn't make me feel better.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that and make the comment. And let me try to answer that. So, like I said, I've been doing this for a quarter century, and I have seen people make dramatic comebacks and really recover. But a number of the people that I work with, most doctors would say my patients, I don't actually like to do that, I just say people I work with, tell me that had I gotten into treatment earlier, you think I'm doing well now, doc? God knows where I could have been. So I don't know you, maybe you didn't have any ill effects, but a lot of the folks that I've been working with tell me that they had some significant ill effects from the number of relapses. Not to mention, every time that somebody gets into that state, you're putting yourself at risk with the law. I mean, police come, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, in New York, we've had so many horror shows because things happen. I am, for one, trying to prevent that, and whether we're going to talk about significant cognitive deterioration or not. And again, I think there is some data to support that. That said, that doesn't mean that everyone has to go that way, but more importantly, if we can prevent that, we can prevent the relapse, and whatever the risk is, including significant legal trauma, why not together on the same page try to do that? That's really all I'm trying to say by making that statement. Yep.
I have a question. You talked about engagement, but I didn't hear you say anything about field-based services, and I was wondering if you could speak
I'm sorry,
to
I
that.
didn't hear the last part.
Field-based, going out into the field and meeting the person where they're at.
Yeah. So we have done outreach to people who are homeless over the years. We haven't been doing that as much recently because we have done that, and we have a number of people who were formerly homeless who are housed. What we do is if you don't show up to Fountain House, we will try to make a call, and if there's no success in a telephone, we will send people out there. And again, if people are willing to open the door, at times we've gone out and people are not doing well medically. They've had some kind of medical crisis. So what our experience shows is that we do a lot of outreach. I am still affiliated with other programs, not Fountain House in particular, because we're not doing active outreach to people on the streets right now. We may actually resume that. But we're certainly still affiliated with programs that do. And in New York City in particular, I think we do a pretty fair job. I'm going to say good, but a fair job of engaging people and getting people off the streets and into housing.
Thank you.
Yep.
My name is Chris Harrod. I was a Skid Row alcoholic for nearly 10 years. I got sober in 1985. I went and got an undergraduate degree in business, went to UCLA School of Law, and I graduated from there in 94. I worked with homeless people and people with mental health issues at a place called Backup, Benefits Access Clients Urban Project. And I recently turned 65. And I tried to get my Medicare, and I got more stories about what I was entitled to and not entitled to. It's very confusing. What I do at Backup is I'm a benefits advocate. So I help people with their SSI or Social Security disability applications and working through the system on that. So it's mind-boggling. I have a law degree from UCLA, and I still get boggled by the system.
I hear that, and I thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to thank everybody. I knew when I invited these people that they were great people, but they gave enormously interesting and informative and compelling talks, and you have also been a great audience. Wish we could accommodate everybody tomorrow. We're going to plan better next year, and I'll see those who can come tomorrow. Thank you very much.